Prime Minister is offering immunity, essentially, to anyone who is still holding hostages, saying if you leave with your hands above your head, lay down your arms, release the hostages, we will let you leave alive. But if you continue to hold on to the hostages, we're coming to get you.
So let's be really clear here about what the Israeli government is asking. It's offering immunity to the remaining Hamas members in Gaza if they give themselves up in exchange for the release of all the hostages. We've had confirmation within the last hour that Israel's foreign minister says the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, has been killed. Earlier, a statement from the IDF confirmed an assault in the Gaza Strip targeting 3 militants. Sinwar is known as the architect of the October 7th attacks on Israel. Here's the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, speaking in the last hour.
I'm standing here today to tell you that he has been killed. He who killed and caused the worst massacre ever since the Holocaust. He was killed by our soldiers, our heroic soldiers. And we have finished our accounts with him. But the mission ahead of us has not been completed.
Well, let's go to Eylon Levy now, former Israeli government spokesperson. Good evening and thank you for joining us.
A very good evening.
Is your work done in Gaza now, the work of the Israeli Defense Forces, is that now complete?
There is certainly an opportunity now that the end of Sinwar will mean the end of the war that he started. Hamas has lost the war. But Hamas needs the world's help to understand that. What we need now is international pressure on Hamas's remaining leaders to lay down their arms, release the hostages, and allow for the peaceful reconstruction of Gaza in a way that it's not subjugated by a terrorist organization. But Israel has been clear this war can only end after all the hostages are released. And hopefully now they will release them. The Prime Minister is offering immunity, essentially, to anyone who is still holding hostages, saying if you leave with your hands above your head, lay down your arms, release the hostages, we will let you leave alive. But if you continue to hold on to the hostages, we're coming to get you.
So let's be really clear here about what the Israeli government is asking. It's offering immunity to the remaining Hamas members in Gaza if they give themselves up in exchange for the release of all the hostages.
Correct. Israel's mission since October 7th has been to remove Hamas from power, to dismantle its military, and to secure the return of all the hostages. So Israel is continuing to demand that all the hostages be released and that Hamas be removed from power. If they want to be removed from power in a gunfight like Yahya Sinwar, that is up to them. And if they want to surrender, that would obviously be the preferable option. But there is now an opportunity to finally bring to an end the war that Sinwar began and to turn a new leaf. And we're already seeing reports inside Gaza of celebrations among Gazan civilians who are telling, places like the New York Times, they hope Sinwar rots in hell now because of the war that he brought on them and that can now end if they surrender.
What is the likelihood, do you think? Because we've been here before in terms of negotiating the release of hostages. And, certainly while Yahya Sinwar was alive and it's thought hiding in those tunnels, under the terrain in Gaza, potentially buffering himself with Israeli hostages. While he was alive, there was no chance that Hamas was going to surrender. What do you think the chances are now of the legacy of Sinwar being so poor that his former colleagues, will leave Gaza with their hands held high in surrender?
It's not clear who's in charge of Hamas now. It would appear that the heir apparent is Khalid Mashal, who lives in Qatar, which is, of course, a NATO ally. And so the world has an opportunity now to tell Qatar, you must extradite Mashal to us, get him to surrender, or there will be consequences. There are actions the world can take in order to help Hamas understand that its only option now is to surrender and release the hostages. But let's remember that we are dealing with a fanatical jihadist terror organization that is driven by an extreme religious ideology that has deliberately brought so much death and destruction to Gaza in advance of that jihadi ideology. And so, this isn't going to come to them naturally that they need to surrender. Their allies need to help them understand that this is over. Hamas is backed by Qatar, Iran, and Turkey. And those countries need to be pressured to tell Hamas, it's over. You've lost the war.
Do you also need the support of other nations who could be peace brokers in this as well? Will Israel be going to its allies, to those other countries that have been involved in these negotiations, Egypt, Turkey to some extent, but also the US as well. Will you be turning to them and asking them to double down their efforts?
Israel has already appealed to foreign leaders around the world from allied nations, saying there is an opportunity now to bring to an end the war that Hamas started. We need the war to end with all the hostages home. Obviously, we're not going to abandon them. But we also need the war to end with the Hamas terror regime removed from power. Because if we reach a ceasefire that simply leaves Hamas in power and Yahya Sinwar's successor in charge of Gaza, it only starts the clock ticking to the next war. It will be impossible to rebuild Gaza if the Hamas war machine is still there, determined to use the concrete that comes in for humanitarian purposes to build more tunnels. So there is an opportunity now. There is an opportunity now for the world to pressure Hamas to surrender, to release the hostages, and for the Palestinians to choose leaders who will repudiate the October 7th massacre, the October 7th war, and turn to a future of peace.
And will Israel want a part of governing in Gaza?
No, Israel's been very clear. We do not want to govern the Gaza Strip. Israel left Gaza in 2005. It never wanted to go.
How do you want to be involved, though? Because I understand, I mean, this is all obviously come through, perhaps some diplomatic channels, but I understand, I would understand completely Israel wanting some sort of say, wanting some sort of protection against another Hamas rising in Gaza.
Sure. Israel has no interest in being the civilian government in Gaza, but it does understand that it will need to retain overarching security control of the territory for the foreseeable future. Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005 and in exchange got Hamas, the rockets, and the October 7th massacre. It withdrew from Lebanon in 2000 and in exchange got Hezbollah, another Iranian proxy army, more rockets, and the threat of another invasion from the north. So Israel understands in order to have peace, you need not only to destroy Hamas, but to demilitarize Gaza. And the IDF is the only force that can be responsible for ensuring that Gaza is demilitarized, that Hamas is not able to smuggle in more weapons, more missiles to rebuild its army, so that we can have a chance of peaceful reconstruction and ultimately moving towards a diplomatic settlement.
But you can't get rid of the ideology, can you? And I wonder if the death of Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, will perhaps embolden other less senior leadership to make a play for the top spot. It will embolden them further.
I don't know whether anyone will want to take the leadership of Hamas because they know that the IDF will come after them. I think what would really have energized terrorism is if this war ended with Sinwar climbing onto the rubble in Gaza and declaring victory and saying, look, we managed to withstand Israel and get away with the October 7th massacre. That's what would have energized the idea of Hamas. But if Hamas's ideology is to declare a forever war against Israel, perpetrated through barbaric violence, the death not only of Sinwar, but of the entire Hamas leadership, they're all dead now, shows them that that idea has no future. That idea will only bring the Palestinians misery and further conflict. And if they want to live lives of peace and prosperity, which is what I hope they want, they will need to embrace a different idea. But if they don't, that ideology can no longer be in power in Gaza, just like the ideology of ISIS is no longer in power in Iraq and Syria.
Eylon Levy, what is the plan if there is to be no peace deal, if there isn't to be no release of hostages and no surrender of Hamas? What is in the immediate plan then for the IDF in Gaza?
Well, let's zoom out and understand the bigger strategic picture. October 7th was the opening shot of a regional war in which Israel has found itself under attack on 7 fronts. That is exactly what Sinwar wanted. Every day we have attacks from Gaza, also from Lebanon, also from Yemen, from Iraq, from Iranian militias in Syria, Palestinian terrorists in the West Bank, and of course ballistic missile attacks from Iran. This is already a regional war in which we're fighting for our lives on 7 fronts. And what Israel will try to do is to keep up military pressure on Hamas to free the hostages, make sure it cannot rebuild the missiles that it has used to target Israel,
and so
continue to pressure against
I guess I'm going to press you, Alon Levy, for the immediate plan in Gaza. I understand these 7 fronts. I understand the wider implications. But of course, with the leader of Hamas in Gaza now gone, dead, what is the immediate plan in Gaza? Because there is an awful lot of pressure on Israel to cease and desist to the point where humanitarian aid can flow freely, that they have razed to the ground too many buildings there, that enough is enough. What is the immediate plan of the IDF, do you imagine, in Gaza?
Yeah, Israel is under a lot of pressure to return to the reality that existed on October 6th, 2023, and Israel is resisting that pressure. It is going to try to exploit the confusion and chaos in the wake of the death of Sinwar to get whoever is holding the hostages, because it's not clear what their chain of command is, they're all dead, to free the hostages and surrender. It thinks there is an opportunity here for the captors of the terrorists, the captors of the hostages, to surrender, release the hostages, be sent into exile.
But if that doesn't happen, Eylon, sorry to press you, Eylon, if that doesn't happen, will the IDF, will Israel continue, as it has done over the last few weeks, with that intense desire, intense shelling, intense military action in Gaza to try and wipe out more of Hamas? Will they return to that agenda?
If, despite the death of the entire Hamas leadership, Hamas is determined to continue waging war against Israel, then Israel will continue fighting in that war until it removes Hamas from power, so there can't be another October 7th, and frees every single hostage.
Look, thank you for speaking to us. Really appreciate your time on what is, I'm sure, an incredibly busy evening for you. Eylon Levy, former Israeli government spokesperson. Thank you.